Right before you fall asleep tonight, you'll do something you've done every night of your life without noticing. Breathe in the smell of your own sheets, and somewhere behind your eyes, your brain will read it as a signal older than language itself. Safe, familiar, time to let go. A cluster of cells, no bigger than a grain of rice, will start flooding your blood with a chemical whose entire purpose is to switch your mind off, gently, on schedule, the way it has switched off every human brain for as long as human brains have existed. Now imagine that switch simply stops working. At first glance, it sounds like an extraordinary, almost miraculous gift. 8 extra hours carved into every single day, an entire additional third of a lifetime handed back to humanity. Your mind immediately begins calculating the possibilities. Millions of hours unlocked for reading, building, exploring, or simply sitting under the stars without the nagging deadline of fatigue. It feels like the ultimate victory over human limitation. But that seduction rests on a profound, dangerous misunderstanding of what sleep actually is. Sleep is not an empty pause button, nor is it wasted time. It is an aggressive, non-negotiable biological maintenance cycle that cannot be deferred or bypassed. While your conscious mind lies dormant, your brain engages in a violent, microscopic house cleaning. Specialized fluid channels open between neural pathways, washing away toxic metabolic waste products accumulated during waking hours. Synapses are trimmed, cellular damage is repaired, immune cells are recalibrated, and short-term chaos is structured into permanent memory. When that biological switch fails, you do not gain extra waking hours. You lock an engine running at full power while welding the exhaust shut. Within 96 hours of continuous consciousness, cognitive coherence shatters. Hallucinations bleed into reality, emotional regulation disintegrates into paranoia, and the immune system collapses. The loss of sleep does not liberate human potential. It triggers an inescapable, exponential cascade of biological decay. To understand how human society fractures when rest becomes impossible, we must trace the quiet unraveling through the lives of those caught in the waking storm, from infants' sleepless clinical wards in South America to the silent altered rhythms of industrial hubs in East Asia. On the 7th continuous night without sleep, inside a dimly lit municipal hospital in Buenos Aires, Argentina, an nurse stares at her own hand as a subtle, rhythmic tremor shakes her fingers. The air in the corridor smells faintly of stale coffee, rubbing alcohol, and cold, damp air drifting through an open window. Her blood pressure monitors beep in errant, erratic cadences. Every bed around her is filled not with victims of a physical pathogen, but with individuals whose bodies are simply tearing themselves apart from within. Without the nightly neurological purge, her short-term memory stutters. She records a patient's vital signs on a chart, only to forget the numbers 3 seconds later. Her eyes feel dry and gritty, as though lined with fine glass dust, yet her optic nerve refuses to allow the dark mercy of unconsciousness. She steps into a quiet supply closet, pressing her forehead against the cold stainless steel shelving, listening to the muffled, hollow hum of a city where millions of hearts are racing at resting speed, unable to slow down. 3 weeks into the global waking, in a glass-walled logistics tower in Seoul, South Korea, a freight coordinator watches a wall of monitors tracking automated delivery fleets. The traditional boundary between the day shift and the night shift has completely dissolved. Commercial freight trucks rumble through suburban streets at 3 in the morning under the glare of harsh white streetlights that never turn off. Factories operate at maximum throughput around the clock, but the human labor force directing them is unraveling under chronic cognitive drift. Errors multiply across the supply grid. Cargo containers are misrouted across oceans. Power grids flicker as maintenance schedules are missed, and financial markets run continuously in a frantic, uncalibrated loop. The quiet, restorative silence that once allowed cities to reset at night is gone, replaced by a restless, grinding momentum that produces less and less value while consuming double the resources. He looks down at his desk, where a paper planner lies open, its dates and hourly blocks blurred into a meaningless continuum without a single break. If you are watching this right now and feeling a quiet unease take hold, That is a natural response to seeing the invisible framework of human life strip away. We are observing the breakdown not of our cities or machines, but of our very neurological anchor. Stay with me, because as we push deeper into this perpetual day, the story shifts from the immediate collapse of our routines to the extreme engineering and spiritual shifts humanity attempts in order to exist without rest. By the second month, inside a sterile subterranean laboratory in Frankfurt, Germany, a biomedical engineer adjusts the flow rates on a specialized neurodialysis catheter attached to a volunteer test subject. The room smells of ozone, synthetic saline, and chilled fluorocarbons. Since biological sleep cannot be induced, his team is attempting to artificially replicate its essential functions while the patient remains awake. Micropumps synthetic cerebrospinal fluid through modified intrathecal lines, attempting to mechanically flush metabolic toxins out of the brain tissues before fatal inflammation sets in. The equipment hums with a mechanical precision, artificially clearing small amounts of cellular waste, but it cannot replicate the complex neural choreography of deep restorative phases. The volunteer sits upright, staring vacantly at a diagnostic screen, receiving the physical equivalent of a brainwash while remaining wide awake, trapped in a state of synthetic lucidity that keeps the body functioning while the mind remains permanently suspended in twilight. He reaches out with a gloved hand to adjust a drip valve, watching clear fluid trickle through a silicone tube, measuring the thin line between mechanical survival and cognitive oblivion. 6 months into the endless wakefulness, inside a quiet library overlooking the dark, wave-battered coast of Reykjavik, Iceland, an archivist sits at a long oak table surrounded by ancient saga manuscripts. Outside, the natural darkness of the subarctic winter night offers no refuge. The human minds within the city remain brightly, relentlessly lit. For thousands of years, human language, poetry, and faith were built upon the fundamental polarity of light and darkness, labor and rest, life and the temporary death of sleep. Now the concept of a day has lost its anchor. Dreams, the ancient, surreal landscape where human culture processed fear, hope, and myth, have vanished from the species entirely. People no longer speak of tomorrow or yesterday because time has flattened into an endless, exhausting now. She runs her fingers across a medieval page, describing the peaceful sleep of ancient kings, realizing that an entire dimension of human internal experience has been erased. She closes the heavy leather volume, setting it quietly on the wooden desk where it will sit under the cold, perpetual glare of an unextinguished room. To understand why artificial fixes and mechanical flushes struggle to replace sleep, we must examine the remarkable biological architecture of the human brain during deep rest. When you lie down and the body relaxes, your central nervous system initiates a process as complex and elegant as a high-efficiency municipal water treatment system. Scientists studying the brain's waste clearance discovered the glymphatic system, a specialized hydraulic network that remains largely inactive during waking hours. During deep NREM sleep, astroglial cells actually shrink by nearly 60%, dramatically increasing the space between brain cells. This allows cerebrospinal fluid to surge through the tissue like an automated washing machine, carrying away metabolic byproducts that accumulate while you think, move, and experience the world. Attempting to replace this process with waking medical intervention or chemical suppressants is like trying to overhaul a jet engine while the aircraft is flying at full speed. The brain's structural maintenance requires the conscious mind to completely disengage, to flip that tiny biological switch behind the eyes, so that energy can be diverted from external perception to internal restoration. Without that total shutdown, the delicate balance of neural chemistry degrades, proving that our waking consciousness is not a permanent state, but merely one half of a delicate, alternating rhythm. When we step back and contemplate a world where sleep is permanently removed, we are forced to confront a profound truth about the limits of living organisms. Humanity is fundamentally bound to the cycles of the natural world. In an age where human ingenuity can split the atom, transmit data across oceans in milliseconds, and construct machines that leave the planet, We often operate under the subtle assumption that biological constraints are merely temporary engineering problems waiting to be solved. We treat our bodies as engines and our minds as software that can be optimized for continuous output. But the absolute necessity of sleep serves as a quiet, unyielding boundary marker. This speculative scenario reveals that rest is not a weakness or an evolutionary design flaw. It is the foundational cost of complex consciousness. The ability to think, feel, love, and perceive the cosmos requires a corresponding period of letting go, a mandatory surrender of control that connects every human being to every other living creature on Earth. Our resilience does not come from pushing past our biological limits, but from honoring the intricate ancient balances that allow life to exist in the first place. The next time you pull the blanket up and breathe in the quiet smell of your own sheets, take a moment to welcome that heavy descending shadow behind your eyes. It is not lost time, but the quiet miracle that restores your humanity for another day. And as long as that switch continues to turn off, the story is still being written.